All right. This is an inaugural podcast with interesting marketers. I posted on LinkedIn that I want to have conversations with people who have interesting stories to tell, and I think people will find insights from these stories. Joshua Corbelli reached out, filled out a form. I asked some questions about things that we might be able to talk about on a podcast. And what I really like is that he shared that he started two agencies during economic downturns. And I think, with what's happening in the employment market, people are suddenly finding that secure jobs aren't as secure as they used to be. And, those that are ambitious and talented and know that they have skills they want to use and don't want to sit around and either collect unemployment or collect severance packages, they're hustling. They're getting out there and they're starting agencies and looking for clients and reaching out to the networks. This is something that I'm sure many people want to do, but could be scary. So Joshua, I know you did it. So tell people, how do you do this? Like, how do you work up the courage? What's the first thing that you do to start an agency in a downturn?
Well, you brought up some points about kind of the changing nature of where things are, but it actually, when you said that, it doesn't feel like so long ago we were having a very similar conversation, right? Secure jobs aren't secure anymore. People don't stay at a career for 30 years with a pension. That's just not a thing. So, back in 2009, 10, I had been in SEO for a few years at that point, and kind of had a business doing that with my brother. And we had a few clients, and ended up meeting the woman who is now my fiance. And she had an advertising focusing more on traditional style, billboards, radio, TV, offline stuff. And so we kind of joined forces where I brought the digital, and we ended up working some really great multi-channel campaigns. And where we were at that time, we were up in Redding, California, which is relatively small, about 100,000 people. But there's really no economic driver, right? And that area, like many places in the country, got hit very hard. And so without even realizing or preparing for it, we kind of found ourselves in the employment rate, I think, was like 18% in the county. So there was no job. And to your point, it's like, well, do I try and trust my future to somebody else, or do I just figure I've learned some stuff along the way and I can continue to grow, and why not just take that plunge? So that's how we approached it in 2008. Very unprepared. And it actually worked out pretty darn well for us. And this time, though, I've been with Thomson Reuters, which is a large organization, and I've been with them for 7 years. And in February, it was time to change. I made that decision. I just timed this one really poorly because a few weeks later, things started to go down pretty quickly. Thankfully, in the few weeks I was kind of up and on my own, I was able to bring on a handful of clients, and so far nobody's left me, but I've also been able to grow their monthly revenue by about 10% across the board. And in an economic downturn, that's something that's pretty darn fulfilling to think about. So I don't know if there's a secret. It's just, if you want it bad enough, you'll figure out a way to do it. And that sounds stupid, but we could probably get into some specifics. Do you have any?
Yeah. So how do you find your first client? Like, what made you, how did you go to a first client and be like, hey, you're going to be my first client? Or do you go to first client and say, I got this agency in operation ready to take on your business? And sorry, I didn't ask you before. What are the specific services you're selling, and what are you doing for the clients?
So we focus typically on small to medium-sized businesses, whereas your experience is more enterprise and kind of large scale. Now, in the roles I had at Thomson Reuters, I worked in the legal marketing division, and so I have a very deep understanding of digital marketing kind of trends and strategies that work for attorneys, which is a very competitive niche. And so, the roles I had there, I started off as a nationwide SEO consultant. So I had some of the top accounts across the country. After a couple of years of that, they created this new role where I had basically San Francisco to LA. I had the top 10 accounts for the company. And I was on a plane up to your neck of the woods, 2-3 times a month visiting with clients. So I got to see firsthand what some of the bigger spenders were doing effectively, what was working. And then after that, I transitioned for about 2 years into a field sales role in the LA area. And so the experience there was all in the legal vertical and kind of a few different aspects. I know what works on the back end, but I also know what clients of varying sizes, what the challenges are and what they're facing. So it was pretty important for me to experience all that. And, as you do these types of things in various roles, you meet people, and you develop relationships. And it was hard for me to go into sales. That was never my background. But I was given a piece of advice by a very close friend who was very successful. And he said, look, if you can go in and have some conversations and teach people a few things and build some relationships, eventually that's going to turn into revenue for you. And, that's a simplified way of saying it, but it was right. And so the company, I wasn't trying to disparage or anything, but there's a non-solicitation agreement. And so I couldn't proactively go out and say, hey, I'm no longer with Thomson Reuters. Do you want to do business with me? But back to the relationship piece, there are people I still keep in touch with. I got a text message yesterday from a former client asking me where I've gone. And so it's one of those things where the clients came just by some of the relationships I've built over the years. Frankly, I didn't really have to try that hard to bring on the first few. The other question you asked was kind of what do I do?
Well, how do you get them? Like, how do you get that first client? Like, how do you sign them?
So to me, having the sales background, there's a couple different, these were very warm to me because they were relationship based. And, they approached me and said, hey, we're not thrilled with what we're getting. Some were with Thomson Reuters, some were with other providers. It didn't really matter.
So you built a long-term relationship that you were able to tap.
Exactly. And it wasn't even a push. They just said, look, we're not happy. Would you mind taking a look and giving me your thoughts? Right. And about half of them, I said, look, for what you're spending, you're actually not getting a bad deal. I wouldn't change it. If you could throw some more in, I could help you out, but I'm not going to tell you to switch it. The other people, I said, look, here's what's not working. And here's how we would do it differently. And just kind of left it at that. And the relationship, again, I think is what led to those. But the other piece is, I've got a pretty decent sales process built into me now. So that's, I've started some of the outreach on that end recently because I'm finding clients I have are spending more money. And I think just anecdotally, some of these businesses, and it's professional firms that we work with. So accountants, CPAs, surgeons, doctors, and attorneys. But I think everybody's been hit so hard for a few months now that they're ready to start getting some clients in the door. And so where they may have not wanted to market in the past, they're willing to spend some money now. So,
That's good news. That's good news for all of us.
I'm trying not to jinx it, but I'm feeling really good about it right now. In fact, I just brought on a new client 2 days ago. So I think things are looking up. It's just, for me, I start with the relationships, and I was given a compliment by somebody, and it's the exact approach I wanted to take. And they said, I'm doing business because I don't feel like you're selling me. And that was my own thing going into it, is like, I know what types of salespeople I hate dealing with. We all get hit up and try to be sold. And I told myself, if I can approach this in a way that I would want to communicate with somebody approaching me, then I'm going to do it. And if not, then we're not even going to sit down to meet for 30 minutes, So that was kind of my own.
With the customer's pain points. I love that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the nutshell. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I rambled a bit.
No, I like that. So what would be your sales process if you had to answer that in a nutshell?
Well, we do have one that we're starting now. So If it's something like, let's say you want to go after, you want to bring on some plastic surgeons, right?
To do
Again,
SEO. The plastic surgeon's looking to get some SEO going.
Plastic surgeons, and I don't sell SEO specifically. What I found over the course of the past 10 years is it's usually if somebody says, I want an SEO program or I want to rank for these terms, whatever it is, you break it down. And the end of the day, people want their phone to ring with people who can pay what their rates are. That's all it comes down to. So I don't pitch SEO necessarily, but let's say you want to talk to plastic surgeons who, that's an elective surgery right now. Nobody's been making money from that. So they want some clients. Well, you have to understand every industry has specific kind of ideal clients and then kind of the lower bread and butter. So a criminal defense attorney, for example, most of them don't want to handle DUIs, but they do because it's $3,500 or $5,000. They'll knock it out in a few hours, and that keeps the lights on where they're trying to go after the big federal crimes. Or plastic surgeons, they don't really want to deal with injections or fillers. That's something a lower associate could do, but they do those to keep the bills coming in, right? And then try and turn those people into larger surgery clients or patients. So if I were to go out today and want to go after some plastic surgeons, I'd go and look up the California Board of Plastic Surgeons. And there's a couple different directories. Some of them will have all the contact info that you need. And, I've got some email templates that we start with a fairly personalized approach. There's other tools that you could use to find the emails, but again, I always ask my referrals too. One of the things I've found is, let's say attorneys who typically have a higher disposable income than most, they tend to run in higher end circles. And so a lot of attorneys actually know plastic surgeons, either they've gone to them or their wives have or whatever. And there's a warm kind of cross-industry referral network there. So I wouldn't recommend anybody just sit back and hope it's coming. You've got to kind of work all the angles. But even in that sales process, I start with kind of what it sounded like you were saying, more of an education base. Like I used to maintain for 3 or 4 years, my email list in LA was at about 5,000 attorneys, but I wrote every week and it was never hard sells, but it was always, here's what's happening in the industry, or here are 3 things you could do.
How big is that email list?
What's that?
How big is the email list?
It was about 5,000 people.
Oh, wow.
But that was just for the LA area, right? So, now you can also hire a company to scrape, for example, the entire bar of California. I hired somebody to scrape the entire site. I shouldn't say that, but one could hire that. And, for a couple $100, a list of 50,000 names, right? Now you got to go validate and all that stuff. But, what I know for sure is coming in cold as just another marketer, that's going to go into the spam box real soon.
Got it. So if someone were looking to start an agency right now or go out on their own, and let's not call it an agency, just like a side hustle that needs to pay the bills, what are the top 3 things you would tell them?
Oh, gosh. As much as I hate networking and kind of hate that term, you've got to be...
Well, got to caveat that. You can't really network right now. You're stuck on your couch.
Right. And it's one of those things that I heard early on and I didn't believe until I actually tried it. But if you pull out your phone right now, I guarantee you've got somebody in there who could be your client or who will introduce you to a client. Most people are afraid to kind of, or don't know how to navigate the conversation of transitioning a friendship or a relationship into a possible business ask. So I'd say one of those things is, definitely go through your network, and then kind of know what you're doing. Marketing is really, really difficult in that there's no standardized certification or you could get a couple of HubSpot, validation or Google Analytics, but there's no standardized level of experience or knowledge. And so you have a bunch of people now who, read a couple blog posts on Eli Schwartz's website, and now they think they're an SEO expert. And so you're kind of competing with a huge pool of people. And the other thing I would say to do is always, at my company, I always had side gigs going on. I was never competing in the same industry. But what I know is that when you're working for somewhere else, the more stuff you do on your own, the better off you're going to be. I'm a big fan of, I don't know how to do that. Let's try it and see how hard it is to really do, right? And then I guess the other thing would just be consistency. Whether it's with sales, that's something I got punched in the gut so many times. If you've never been in field sales, you kind of learn to develop the thick skin for it and understand when no really means no, or no means not today, but maybe later, so I think consistency would be the third bullet there.
That's great. So I think that's important to really underscore, is that for those that are in a position where they now have to start an agency because they've lost their job, either they've been laid off or their company's closed, or, for any other reason, they no longer have a job, be confident in their marketing abilities. Know that they previously had a job, they knew something, they have a skill that people are willing to pay for, and, get out there and tell people that they can help them and get paid for it. So I want to close with any other resource, any book you love, any podcast, any conference, what's one thing that someone should go and learn right now to be able to do this?
To be able to do this, this is, I keep these two books. We're big readers at my house, but I keep these two books with me kind of at all times. I don't know if you're familiar with Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I've read this probably 10 times. I have the audiobook. It's just one of those things that's always on in the back of my mind. And for you guys who don't know it, it's just to say that it's a book about negotiation is, I think, a gross understatement, but it really ties in kind of human psychology into conversation. And this doesn't have to be used in a business environment every day. But it really does affect every relationship you have if you kind of take away what it's designed to give you. So that's been super helpful. But anybody who's starting out, this is the book I would say. Have you read this one?
I have not. Playing to Win.
Yeah, by A.G. Lafley, who's the former chairman and CEO of Procter & Gamble. I've read, I don't know how many business books, but what I find is they're all iterations of the same thing, right? It's kind of regurgitation of the same concepts. I really enjoyed this book because it actually gives you a very clear playbook and framework for identifying, and it breaks it down into a few quadrants, but basically, where are we playing? So get specific on your market. What does winning look like? What are the specific tactics we're going to take that we can ensure we win in this specific market? A lot of people, and I'm sure you've met them at these conferences, they've got a $10 million idea, right? But I haven't even taken the time to start a website because, whatever it is, it's,
exactly.
It breaks down very big goals into an achievable framework. So those are the things I would recommend. Podcasts are all over the map, man. I listen to comedy stuff. I listen to business. It just kind of depends on the day. Do you have any recommendations on that?
Podcast that I really like listening to, and I don't know if you've ever heard it before, is Jason Swank's Agency Masterclass, I think it's called. So he interviews agency owners, and it's just interesting to learn from them, failures, successes.
Yeah, I like that. There was one that I found really possibly my favorite podcast that I've listened to. It was maybe 2 years ago now. Tim Ferriss interviewed Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy. It's like a 2 or 3 hour, it was a long one, but I really appreciated it because I like listening to stories of people who have kind of a nonlinear career path.
Yeah.
You know, like Mike Rowe did the dirty jobs thing. He was in, I think, the Baltimore choir. I mean, he's done so many crazy different things. And that's the type of stories I tend to relate with, because I've not had, you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house. Like, that's just not been my trajectory. And so I tend to relate to people who have an unusual story.
Got it. All right. I will check that out. Well, I appreciate you being here to have this conversation. I think that a lot of people are going to be thinking about the same thing, about whether to start an agency, start consulting. How can someone get in touch with you? Like, what's your favorite platform?
LinkedIn. I'm trying to leverage that a little bit more these days. So just Josh Corbelli, linkedin.com, Josh Corbelli. I don't use Twitter. You can find me there, but I won't reply. So LinkedIn's probably the best, or you can check out bolddigitalventures.com.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, Eli. Any final thoughts or wisdom for me? I mean, you come from big big company, and now you kind of a different approach, but you're a man on the streets these days. You know, what are you seeing out there?
You know, the one thing I would say to anyone looking to start an agency is I would agree exactly with what you said. Your point number 3, which is start doing the side hustles, and you'll learn that you're good at it, and you'll learn you're bad at it and you shouldn't do it. So,
yeah.
You know, I was recently having a conversation with someone who asked me about whether she should go out and start consulting. And I said, you need to start practicing right now.
Yeah. You
can't just dive into it cold. So I'll close with that. Like, if you haven't done a side hustle before, start tomorrow. But thank you for being here.